Okay. Dear panelists, dear AAA partners and friends, dear participants, especially those participants on the streaming, because they are the most numerous among us, and also dear brothers and sisters from all the African continent. It's my privilege to open this event, which aims at sharing sustainable technical and financial solutions to achieve a climate-resilient food security in Africa from the perspective of key finance, research, and sustainable development institutions around the world. As you know, Africa is lagging on the Sustainable Development Goal 2 to end hunger and ensure food security. According to the FAO, 282 million people on the continent, over the 1/5 of the population, faced hunger in 2020, which is 46.3 million more than 2019. National and global measures taken to contain the COVID-19 pandemic have disrupted economic and livelihoods activities, leading to a drop in real gross domestic products in Africa of 2.1% in 2020. Due to the climate change, Africa is facing increasing temperatures and sea levels, changing precipitation patterns, and more extreme weather, which are threatening food and water security and socio-economic development in Africa. African countries, our countries, will need to revise their NDCs in order to provide better costing of future adaptation needs and current spend on adaptation, as well as financing gaps and opportunities. This can only be achieved by identifying and standardizing adaptation metrics, which will help government, private sector, and financial institutions to evaluate and steer investment. Improving food security and nutrition on the continent will require close collaboration between African countries and at the international level, as well as rapid, at-scale transition to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food system. Since its launch in 2016, the Adaptation of African Agriculture Initiative, AAA, to climate change is working intensively with its national and international patterns, including the private sector, and I'm very happy today that we have a lot of representatives from the private sector, of course online, to boost technology and knowledge transfer, evaluate adaptation needs, promote scientific research, but more importantly to leverage innovative and affordable funding for African agriculture. In February 2020, the AAA initiative was given a full mandate by the African Union, heads of states in Addis Ababa, to pursue actions to advance climate action in agriculture through activities such as the mobilization of climate finance and capacity building. Maybe I will give you just a few words about some of our projects to be more concrete. For example, the AAA initiative is fully supporting the African Union Green Recovery Action Plan to foster resilience agriculture in Africa by promoting the implementation of what we call the CSIPs, Climate Smart Agriculture Investment Plans, in various African countries, identifying funds for the development of new CSIPs, and mobilizing funds for their implementation. In close collaboration with the World Bank, also the International Center of Tropical Agriculture, CIAT, and FAO, we have also mobilized resources and technical support for the development of Climate Smart Agriculture Investment Plan for 7 African countries: Morocco, Côte d'Ivoire, Mali, Ghana, Republic of Congo, Cameroon, and Burkina Faso. Also, in a close collaboration with the AAI, which is very well represented here by Ambassador Nafo, we have also we have been, and I think he will talk more about it later on, we have also altogether raised the largest, I think the largest, readiness fund of Green Climate Fund in order to prepare the agriculture of 23 African countries to meet the challenges linked to food security in a context of climate change. The AAA initiative also launched together with several international organizations the International Platform on Adaptation Metrics as an outcome of a series of international adaptation conferences organized by the Kingdom of Morocco since COP22. It is called IPAM, and it aims to forge common metrics to monitor, evaluate, and foster adaptation to climate change worldwide. IPAM already counts 46 associate members and organizes a total of 12 international workshops, and it has developed a work program called Adaptation Metrics Mapping and Evaluation, AMME, which provides a framework for identifying the appropriate metrics for the implementation of any climate change adaptation project. I would like to thank all the panelists for their precious participation to this very important event. And I would like to thank all represented organizations here for their support, working together to ensure food security and strong agriculture growth in an environmentally sustainable manner on the scale of the continent. Now I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Paul Elvis Nfor-Tangen, who will speak on the behalf of Her Excellency Josefa Leonel Sacco, the Commissioner of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment of the African Union, who was supposed to be with us, but she has a little bit sickness, but I'm sure she will be extremely well represented by Paul. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and all protocol duly respected. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very, very nice hall. I mean, I think this is the biggest thing I've seen in my life. The whole expo is extraordinary, you know. So, I mean, I don't know how they do it, but somehow they manage to do it. Yeah, so thanks for the invitation. And let me first of all express the regret of Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa Sacco, who fell sick while on her way here from Brussels. And she had to continue to see her doctor in Portugal. So, yeah, so on her behalf, I want first of all to excuse her from this and to say she is very much with us, and she sends her special greetings and her regards to the AAA and the AA initiative. So the topic that we are treating this evening is quite important, especially for Africa. As you know, we are basically an agricultural economic base. 70% of our population depends on agriculture for livelihood and income generation activities. And the kind of agriculture that we practice in Africa is not is very, very vulnerable to the caprices of nature, to climate change, to land degradation, and to all the caprices, desertification and drought. And when we talk about agriculture in this aspect, we are not talking about just the farming. We are talking about the perennial farmers. We are talking about those involved in a pastoralist farming, pastoralist agriculture. We're talking about those who are involved also with small holder farmers. So these are the mainstay of Africa's economy. And so far, it is very, very vulnerable to the caprices of climate change. And we were aware of the impact of the vulnerability of Africa's agriculture was shown by the incidence of the COVID pandemic. the sector was highly beaten by the COVID pandemic. And as you know, when the COVID breakout and the various social distancing measures were put in place, it means the smallholder farmers could no longer sell their product, which was their mainstay. It means they could not go to the market where they have their daily bread, because most of them live from hand to mouth. So they were extremely, extremely vulnerable. So the issue of resilience, the issue of building resilience of agriculture, African agriculture, to climate change and to the caprices of nature is very, very important. I am the coordinator of the Great Green Wall for the Sahara and Sahel Initiative. So adaptation is all about adapting our agriculture to climate change and to the various changes that are taking place. All of this today we've been talking about adaptation. We're talking about the need to enhance the adaptive capacity of agriculture, especially in the drylands of Africa that constitutes 60% of the whole of the continent. So over the past few months, the African Union is undergoing serious reforms. We are reforming the way we are working. We are reforming the way we are doing business. And the purpose of these reforms is to enhance and bring the African Union closer to its partners, to work closer to its beneficiary, to its population, and to be more useful to the needs of our people, and also to work closely with our partners to ensure that the support that we get from our partners go directly to the needs of the people. So from last year, we moved from the traditional DREA, Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture, to the Department of Rural Development, Agriculture, Sustainable Environment, and Blue Economy. So now it's what we call DAP. So all of these changes are taking place because the union wants to be more effective. It wants to adapt to the global changes that's taking place. And there was no better time than just when the COVID breakout, and we already saw the complete disruption of the existing systems. So we are now two departments in one department, two directorates in one department. So we have now the environment and sustainable environment and blue economy in department that gives us now a further capacity to deal with the issues of adaptability, of the need to be more concrete on the ground and to face the challenges squarely. So we, at the level of the Department of Environment, we have so many new programs that are looking at the issues of adaptation. We have the CLIMSAT program that is financed by our European Union partners, which is focusing on providing climate services to our member states. And this is to ensure that we have early warning, we have the necessary equipment, we have the modern and latest equipment, Earth observation, so much so that we provide timely information to the farmers, to the herders, and to our businesses that are involved in agriculture. If you look at, also we have now the blue economy, which is also very important, which is a completely new division, where we are going to work with issues to do with, looking at issues to do with ocean, look at issues to do with blue and green economy. So much so that all those of the continent that are involved in this sector, they are going to be supported. And then when you go now, we move now from rural economy to rural development, because development is more than just economy. And so we are now having a whole division for rural economy, rural development, where it's going to bring synergy among all the challenges that we have, especially the issues related to land tenure system and property right, which is one of the weakest links in Africa's development. And we have, of course, the agriculture and food security that deals with our CADEP program, the African Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, which has been very, which has tailored and shaped what we've been doing in the last decade. And so we also have been working to adapt the reality, and that is why we came into the development of this, of the GRAP. And the GRAP was aimed at the Green Recovery Action Plan, which the various initiatives here present have supported us. We have worked very closely with the British Embassy in Addis Ababa and, of course, in Morocco. We work very closely with UNICA to develop this Green Economic Action Plan. And I think the whole idea of the Green Economic Action Plan with the various sectors where we're talking about resilient agriculture, nature-based solution, ecosystem services, renewable energy, efficient energy, and the just transition. One of the importance of these GRAPs is to look at the need for coordination, the need for synergies, and the need for working together among all of our partners. We have been showcasing this GRAP in many of our important meetings, and the watchword is the need for coordination, is the need for synergies, is the need to work together, mobilize the funds that we're going to support our member states together. It's about looking at the strongest, the comparative advantage of each of our partners to be able to support our member state in the implementation of the Green Recovery Action Plan. So this is one of the key messages that we are going to be looking at today, to call on all of our partners, call of our development partners to work together so that we can face these challenges of the vulnerability of our agriculture, of our environment that is badly affecting our population. So with that, just to conclude, is to say we were very happy with the AAA initiative. We are very happy with all the organizations, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and all those who have been supporting the African Union in this. As the COVID have shown, Ambassador, it's clear that there is nothing like this is an African problem. African problems no longer exist. COVID have shown us that weakness in one area is weakness in every area. They say the biggest challenges, and I'm so happy, sometimes I'm so happy with COVID, actually, because COVID shows us that we seem to be very strong in 2019. And then 2020, 2021, we were completely, I don't know how to put it, completely destroyed by a virus that we don't even see. So I think we need to learn from these gaps that that was shown. We need to know that the time for business as usual is gone. We need to change all of our paradigm. We need to work more together. That's why we call so much for synergies, for coordination, and also to enhance the capacity of our member states. Because the world is one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for those extremely relevant words, and of course, those are words that show that a lot of projects and a lot of initiatives are going at the same time for the African continent. And I think that maybe one of the topics that we want to raise today is how can we also coordinate between all of us and always, work in a certain coherence between us to, of course, go further. Let me introduce Mr. Zitoni Ouldada, the Deputy Director of the Office of Climate Change at the FAO, who will be the coordinator of the panel starting immediately. and he's connected with us through the streaming.
I am indeed, and thank you very much. And let me welcome everyone who's joining us to this event today. As you rightly said, my name is Zitouni Uldada. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment. And it's really my great pleasure to welcome everyone to this event and to give a brief introduction before I start the moderation of this event. I would like to welcome everyone first to this climate resilient agriculture in Africa, sustainable technological and financial solutions. This is organized by the AAA, Adaptation of African Agriculture Initiative. So welcome again everyone who's there in person in Dubai and many of the colleagues who are joining us online. Let me just say a couple of words to set the scene, and then I'll invite my panelists one after one to go through some important aspects about this topic. I think we've seen that the impact of climate change is really all around us, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, has said in its last report that climate change is affecting every region of the world. And we have seen recently how floods in countries like Germany, in China, in the US, we've also seen droughts in Madagascar and wildfires in Greece and in the US. And these extreme events have wide-ranging impacts, obviously, on food security, particularly on food harvest, on livelihoods, and sadly, on people's lives as well. And while no one is really protected or immune from this impact, we know that it is the poorest countries and the most vulnerable communities, particularly women and girls, but also people with disabilities and indigenous people, who are the most affected, who are at the front line of climate impact, and who are the hardest hit. And this is really the issue of the fact that some of these countries and vulnerable communities will be able to adapt, but many will not be able to. And we have seen, just coming out of the COP26 in Glasgow, how encouraging it was to see adaptation given really the attention it deserves and given the importance it deserves. And we expect adaptation to be given even more attention and importance at the African COPs next year, this year, COP27, but also next year, COP28, which will be held in United Arab Emirates. Hunger, unfortunately, is on the rise, driven by conflicts and climate change. And in the context of Africa, both Africa and agriculture are very vulnerable to the impact of climate change. In fact, 70% of the African's population is dependent on rain-fed smallholder agriculture. And according to the African Development Bank, to meet these existing needs of the continent, the average annual cost of adaptation to climate change in the priority sectors related to food security in Africa need to be multiplied by 6 to 10 by 2030, or by 12 to 22 by 2050, really to meet these needs. So there is a strong case for achieving climate resilient agriculture in Africa. And the aim of this event today is to really zoom into this and to learn about sustainable technical and financial solutions through the AAA initiative and its partners who are convening today. And we'll hear various aspects to do with finance, research, challenges, and implementation to achieve a climate resilient food security in Africa. So let me bring in our panelists one by one, and I will ask them a question to answer in 3 minutes each, so we can stick to the time because there are 2 panels today. And I hope that you find this conversation useful. I hope that you will learn more about these aspects I highlighted about the finance, the research, the challenges, and implementation in achieving climate-resilient food security in Africa. So it's my pleasure first to invite the first panelist, Riyad Balaghi, who's the Director of Projects at the AAA Initiative Foundation. And Riyad, if I may start with you, since the AAA is really pertinent in this context for this event, and this is an African initiative. So could you share with us, please, some experience on how the AAA is working to advance adaptation of African agriculture? Over you for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Zitouni. In fact, you remember, maybe all of us remember COP22, when we were all struggling to include Africa and agriculture in the climate agenda. And I think we succeeded in doing that. We all know that now we have the coronavirus process, which is facilitated by FAO. Thanks to FAO, thanks to the Marrakesh Declaration, if you remember, and also thanks to the AAA annual conferences, where we gathered all African ministers of agriculture, and they make a political declaration and strategic vision for African agriculture. And that's the advocacy side of what we are doing at the AAA initiative. But of course, we are pushing also to facilitate and increase the flow of funding to African agriculture. Mrs. Abir, that with the Pan-African Readiness Program, Ambassador Seinafo will talk more about it. But also we succeeded in collecting funds from the World Bank, the French Development Agency, the German Cooperation, to develop what we call climate smart investment plan, which are a number of projects adapted to each of the countries and African countries. We could call it also agroecology or eco-based system solution, whatever. It is a kind of agriculture that is respectful of the nature and the natural resources. And now we have 7 climate smart investment plan for a total investment, potential investment of $2.4 billion that could be deployed and which could benefit to more than 8 million smallholder farmers in Africa. That's the second side. We also work to promote science and technology, and with the help of several international institutions, and thanks to the scientific committee of COP22, we started what we say the International Platform on Adaptation Metrics to forge a common understanding of adaptation metrics and to develop monitoring and evaluation systems for the adaptation of agriculture and other sectors, not only agriculture, cities and water, and also to develop techniques and tools that are adapted to the need of monitoring and evaluation systems. And that's some small parts of what we are doing, Dr. Zitouni.
Thank you very much, Riyad, and thanks very much for sticking to the 3 minutes. Very much appreciate that, and I hope that the next speakers will also do that to keep this flowing nicely. So thank you for that, and you highlighted the number of good points there that bring me into others who are also active in this field, particularly the foundations. And I'm very pleased to bring in now Neil Watkins, who's the Deputy Director, Agriculture and Nutrition Policy and Advocacy at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So Neil, I would like to bring you in now, just ask you a question from your perspective, why is the Gates Foundation actually working on climate change now, and what you can share with us in this field?
Great. Thanks, Dr. Zatouni, and thanks to the AAA Initiative Foundation for inviting me to this. It's a great event. I'll just say a little about the Gates Foundation, where I work, which is a nonprofit foundation based in Seattle, and we're often known most for our work in global health, but we're also, actually our largest strategy by investment is agricultural development. And the reason for that is because we know that investing in smallholder farmers in particular is one of the most equitable and inclusive ways for economies to grow. And we've been working on agriculture for about the past 15 years. And we tend to be we like to think we're a data-driven organization. And over the past few years, as we started looking at the data about what was happening in African agriculture, it really just became impossible to not think about climate change as a central issue. So you've heard some of these, these facts already, but more than 50% of employment in Africa is in the agriculture sector. 90% of African agriculture is rain-fed. And you often hear discussion of climate change in the popular discussion as something that's going to happen in the future, or some theoretical thing, 10 or 20 years from now. I think if you look at the data already, droughts, floods, shorter growing seasons are already impacting African economies hugely. Pest and disease, for example, the large infestation of locusts across East Africa in the past few years is another example of how climate is contributing to major impacts. And from some research we commissioned, by 2030, you'd already have 200 million Africans living in a 2-degree world. That's much before much of the rest of the world. So it's clear that this is something that is a significant issue for African farmers you can't ignore, but also very much aware that the attention is not there, right? If you look at climate finance, only about 19% of climate finance is going to Africa, and only 1.9% to smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. So we felt there was a real issue there and a need to invest. So the sorts of things that we're helping support African governments on, working with institutions like those here around, include innovations, seeds that are drought tolerant or tolerant to flooding. How do you, as climate produces more of these pest and disease outbreaks, how do you predict that? How do you help farmers be prepared for that? And then looking at novel approaches, right? Like how do you look at something like livestock and feed issues, and how do you think about some innovative ways to address those? And then I think even more important is supporting African organizations themselves, like the AAA Initiative, African Adaptation Initiative, the African Union, who are trying to put these issues on the agenda. And so we're supporting and really proud to support some of those groups and want to do more of that, especially in the lead up to COP27, which will be an African COP, of course, later this year.
So thanks very much, Neil. I mean, you highlighted really some good points there to do with the importance of data, also access to climate finance, and the importance of innovation. I mean, all the challenges we're talking about, these three aspects in particular are so critical. They're so key in the context of Africa to move on into climate resilient agriculture. So thanks for highlighting those. And there are other international initiatives that are trying to address these issues, and that brings me to invite Paul Liu, who's the Executive Secretary for the 4 International Initiative, focusing mainly on soil, which is again is really the foundation of resilient agriculture. So Paul, if I can bring you in, and perhaps to explain to everyone what is actually the 4 International Initiative, and what do you expect to be the main objective to focus on at the international level in the coming years or so? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zatouni. Thank you for the AAA to invite me to participate to Sorry, a lot of noise in the here. So our international initiative born at COP21, we are sister with the AAA in Paris in 2015 and is part of the global agenda for action of the UNFCCC, promote soil health and carbon sequestration in agricultural and forest soil. We are proposing to work in a win-win-win situation thanks to the sequestration of carbon in the planet's soil by using the solar CO2 pump that photosynthesis represents to increase soil organic matter. This will help to improve food security, to adapt agriculture to the climate change already ongoing, and through soil's water retention capacity increase and reduction of sensibility to erosion, and to contribute to mitigate this climate change by a decrease of atmospheric CO2. At the heart of the project, there are the soils, the health, their capacity to store carbon, and right next to them, there are those who make this miracle possible, namely the farmers and foresters. The ambition of the 4 per Mil initiative is a global platform to encourage all stakeholders from all parts of the world to raise general awareness and to build an environment conducive to a paradigm shift in the world agricultures towards agriculture that are productive, highly resilient, creating jobs and incomes, and based on the appropriate management of lands and soils, such as agroecology, hence ensuring sustainable development. With the support of nearly 800 partners around the world, including more than 40 countries, among which some African countries, the idea of using agricultural and forest soils to fight climate change is gaining ground to the point of becoming obvious to all. Thanks to our partners and members, among which the AAA initiative, changes are, and FAO of course, changes are taking place in the field level, particularly with the adoption of appropriate practices by farmers and foresters, the development of supportive public policy, and the scientific support needed to understand the evolution of soil carbon stocks and the mechanism that lead to this outcome. Civil society is also finding answer to this desire to see agriculture and forestry around the world follow the path of agroecology. 2 years ago, the initiative adopted its strategic plan 2050 that guides our action for the next 30 years based on our vision, worldwide healthy and carbon-rich soils to combat climate change and end hunger. This year, 2022, all UN conventions will hold their conferences of parties. This gives us the opportunity to rise high in the international agenda the importance of subject of soil health, which is at the very heart of all crucial challenges the humanity is facing: climate change, biodiversity erosion, and soil and food insecurity. Thank you, Dr. Zitouni.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's so nice and clear. Obviously, we can't have a resilient agriculture without healthy soil. It's just impossible. And really appreciate, the work that 4 per Mil has been doing. And this is an opportunity, I think, for the African COP really to raise the profile of the importance of soil and what the initiative is trying to achieve. Let me now zoom into Africa in particular and take the example of Kenya, particularly what's happening really at the community level involving what we call the green champions. And I'd like to invite Peter Odongo, who is the director of the Green in Kenya Initiative Trust. And Peter, if I may ask you, why is it important to involve the green champions from the communities in Kenya for planning, for mobilizing climate finance to finance the resilient agriculture we're talking about at a community level?
Thank you very much, because it is very critical that climate change is one of the most complex based on its cause and effects. And where it affects the local people in Africa is at the local level. But when you hear what is going on at the international, regional, and also national level, and even subnational level, it is clear that the challenges of understanding the complexity, the challenges that are, which is associated with the technological advancements, which is required to transit from the conventional agricultural practices to enable the local farmers, particularly artisan farmers, to adapt to the new climate resilient technological approaches, for example, smart agriculture, and also to get the complexity through which financial resources are required to build the capacity to enable the local farmers get this early warning system. Also to get this flow to transform the effectiveness, we need an intermediary between the policy, between the technological advanced human being or man or a woman. Also, we need the intermediary to interpret these financial mechanisms and solutions which are required to enable the local farmer at household level to adapt, access, understand, interpret, and also enable these people to acquire additional skills in transformative way to enable them to transit in a just and a fair trajectory. It is true that Africa is accessing less than 20%, but some statistics says that of the about 500 billion climate finance that has been moving around the world, Africa has only accessed less than 5%. But this 5% also has never reached the local level where the impact is felt. Less water, destroyed soil, forest, lack of energy for them to make their livelihood sustainable. So it is on this that green champions who are passionate about climate change and sustainability need to be the core through which transition can. And this we're now getting into, if you look at the structural adjustments of 1980s, where agricultural extensions had already collapsed. So there is no interlink between a farmer and the policy, and also the innovation and the technology. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for adding really important information to what Neil said earlier with regard to access to climate finance, and particularly going down to the local community, because that's where the change would need to happen from, and that's where resilience will need to be built from. It's interesting, I mean, Neil did say that only 19% of climate finance is going to Africa, and with just 1.1% going to smallholder farmers. And this really highlights the whole problem. The private sector obviously is key really to helping with access to finance, technology, and innovation. So that allows me now to bring in Céline Montoriol, who's the Sustainability Director at Azura Group. If I may bring you in, Céline, and to ask you from your perspective, working with the private sector, what role do you see for the private sector really in tackling the climate crisis, particularly in Africa?
Thanks a lot, Dr. Zitouni. Thanks for the invitation. To be honest, I think the private sector doesn't play an enough and significant role at the moment facing climate change, but it could become the main player in the coming years. We are living a real awareness moment since 2 years. Yes, that's too long, since 2 years, but we are really in a reveal moment. Private sector is now aware about the consequences of climate change. I think that's not only a question of environment or human impacts, that's also, and above all for company, a question of anticipate the capacity of doing business as usual or not. So that's a question of a responsibility all along the supply chain. I think non-CEO can avoid this subject now, and especially during its board meeting. All of them are questions about what they are doing to make their company more resilient. Companies have now some tools to evaluate the resilience and also their own impact on climate change. We have science-based target initiative tools, we have tools. So yes, that can be a frightening experience for a company or a CEO to know exactly all the risks he will face with, but that's important. So companies, I think, can play a catalytic role. We have the capacity to engage all our value chain from our supplier to the consumer of the products, especially in agri-food sector. Some company as mine, I think, leads some discussion to find compromise on projects with all the stakeholders, national and local authorities, bank clients, suppliers, local and international suppliers. So that's our role, being a catalyst on concrete projects and choosing, and that's really the main thing, choosing the partners which have the same mindset as us regarding sustainable development. That is to say, that's not an option, that's the only way to do business now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celine. It's clear that a lot is expected from private companies. Absolutely. I mean, everyone has to come in together for this climate crisis. But we've been talking about private companies coming in for a while. And you're right, their role need to increase. And it's good that you mentioned the science-based targets. I mean, that's absolutely key in having clarity as to where action is needed. So we're still in the access to finance and the importance of finance for transforming agri-food systems. Early on, I asked Godefroy Grosjean, who's a global leader advisory services at the International Center for Tropical Agriculture at CGIAR. He can't join us, unfortunately, but I did ask him a question earlier about what are the main challenges or bottlenecks for mobilizing finance to transform agri-food systems in response to the climate change. And this was his answer.
Thank you very much, Tony, for this very important question in terms of what prevents us from having more investment flowing into agriculture and food systems to respond to climate change. Let me start with the figure on that. When we look at the numbers, we see that about 300 to 350 billion a year are missing to provide sufficient investment to transform food and land use system to respond to the climate crisis we're facing. At the same time, just for smallholders, they need about close to 200 billion in investments to help them adapt to climate change. And when you look at the current ODA figures, we're at around 10 billion a year going to agriculture, forestry, and fishing. So if we want to respond to the challenge and mobilize sufficient capital, the private sector will have to play a major role in this transformation. Now, at the moment, we see that not enough finance is going to the sector, and this is not necessarily driven by a lack of interest or lack of liquidity. It's rather due to specificities of the sector, of food systems, that make it harder to invest in. And I would highlight three categories of challenges we're facing. One is the limited pipeline of bankable projects. There are not enough investment-ready projects available for investors in the sector. Second, it's often a sector that is perceived at high risk. There is a lack of primary data, very strong information asymmetries between investees and investors, which make it more costly to invest, to do the due diligence, to collect the data that is needed. So that prevents or make it harder to invest. And finally, there is, generally speaking, a lack of intermediation to efficiently connect different pools of capital to investment. So there needs to be more work that is done to connect investors with the type of investments that suits their requirements and their needs. So all of these three challenges make it harder to mobilize finance into food systems, into agriculture, but we need to push the envelope and find solutions to respond to those challenges we are facing.
So that was Godfrey's answer, and you can see he highlighted also really the challenges we're facing in the African continent with regard to mobilizing climate finance and making projects bankable and attractive. Let me now go for a second round for all the speakers in the same kind of brevity in answers to build up on some of the answers that were given. Let me come back to you, Riyadh. You heard, the challenges, particularly in Africa. And what I want to ask you from what you heard is, what are the main challenges then you see in filling the agriculture adaptation gap in Africa?
Of course, the first challenge is the foreseen climate change over Africa and its impacts. That's one. And which is coupled now with existing weaknesses or vulnerabilities in Africa, social, economic, and environmental weaknesses, coupled also with COVID now, with the pandemic, which is exacerbating the existing weaknesses. So I think that's the first challenge, how to cope with climate change, which is increasing in speed and in coverage and in magnitude. That's one. Second, I think challenge is the gap, the adaptation gap. And when we talk about adaptation gap, we talk about finance gap. And the current cost of adaptation in Africa for agriculture only is $0.4 billion per year, which is foreseen to be 10 times in 2050. And I think that's not the real number. I think the real number is much more higher, since it's very difficult to assess or to evaluate the adaptation gap and the costs related to it. So that's the second, I think, challenge of Africa, so the second challenge in how to collect more funds, to allocate more funds to agriculture, to African economies, to smallholder farmers, to the poor. And that's what we are trying to do with our partners and with the help of the African Adaptation Initiative, coordinated by Ambassador Seni Nafo, and others, our partner, the World Bank, and others, and hopefully, and we hope with the Gates Foundation in the future and others. And we also hope that within the framework of the Green Recovery Action Plan that we can do more in the future. But collecting more funds and allocating them and need more capacity building, developing more projects, bankable projects that could be financed, and that's maybe the whole story that for Africa. But we remain optimistic, of course, since Africa is blessed by natural resources, young population, dynamic and enthusiastic, and I think the potential, we need to unlock the potential of African agriculture, and that's a paper that was released by FAO, Dr. Zitouni, I think in 2006, if I remember well, how to unlock the potential of agriculture, and yeah. It's still a story, so we need to do more. But there are, I think there are a lot of goodwill from many organizations and players around adaptation of agriculture in Africa. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks very much, Riyad. You're right, indeed. As I said in my introduction, is very encouraging to see where COP26 left adaptation and the importance of adaptation, and things can only get better from here. There are a number of initiatives again that have been working on innovation, and I'm referring particularly to the Global Commission on Adaptation. And I'd like to ask Neil from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to share with us, since the Bill Gates Foundation, the co-chairs of the Global Commission on Adaptation. Can I ask colleagues to mute your microphone, please? There is a lot of noise. Thank you. So if I could ask Neil to tell us about the Commission on Adaptation, your co-chair, which was really a collaborative effort between different countries and organizations with the aim to raise the visibility of adaptation on the global agenda and to identify what we've been talking about, the financial need for adaptation, of the most effective approaches to adaptation. So what are some of the key needs or recommendations from the Commission that you could share with us? And can I ask people, please mute your microphones. Thank you.
Great, thanks Dr. Zitouni. Yeah, I'll say a little bit about the Commission, which was actually convened by a group of 20 countries from different regions of the world, from Africa, Europe, Asia, North America, South America, and co-chaired by our co-chair Bill Gates, as well as Kristalina Georgieva, now head of the IMF, and Ban Ki-moon, the former Secretary General of the UN. And really the goal, this was back in 2018 and it launched in 2019, was to try to put adaptation more on the global agenda. I think we all know the urgency of mitigation and tackling greenhouse gas emissions, but the reality is we need to raise the profile of issues of adaptation. So it was an attempt to do that. I mean, some of the findings, the key findings, if you look from the report, which really tried to synthesize all the key evidence, was that if you look at something like agriculture, the yields from agriculture are projected to decline by up to 30% by 2050. That'll be devastating for especially Africa's smallholder farmers. More than 100 million people into poverty if adaptation isn't addressed. So, but we've talked a lot about the problem. I think the key thing in the report was to try to demystify what we know does work, right? There is actually good evidence about what some of the best practices are that countries are already using or starting to use to adapt, especially in agriculture. A clear takeaway was that investment in agricultural research and development is a key one, that you get up to a 17-to-1 benefit cost ratio from investing in agricultural R&D through institutions like the CGIAR, through national agricultural research systems in Africa. And this isn't theoretical. I mean, you look at something like drought-tolerant maize in Zimbabwe, where that's been used in Zimbabwe for years, and they're seeing farmers there are getting 600 kilograms more of maize per hectare than they were using conventional approaches in response to some of the this new innovation that came through the CGIAR system. So this is, I think, an example, but there's going to be many more of these kind of research needs that then get translated quickly. Another area from the report was digital farmer services. So how do you get things like weather data to governments, real-time information to farmers about what's coming and what they need to know, information about changing agronomy and changing soils. These are the kind of digital innovations that can be put in farmers' hands and have a big impact. Also managing risks from shocks, right? So things like weather-based ag insurance, and I think really important too for anything in agriculture, extension, right? How do you actually build the capacity of extension systems to actually get these kind of innovations and information to farmers themselves? So I think one of the takeaways of the report was not only do we need more attention, we actually have a good sense of what works. The challenge is, and I think this is what Ambassador Nafa will talk about how do you actually scale up some of these things? How do you get the finance? How do you crowd in? You know, it's less a question of, you know, where do we start, and more a question of how do we scale up some of these things that we know are that look effective and are already working for farmers, just not in enough places. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Neil. Indeed, yeah, scaling up is absolutely key, and I think we've been talking about that for a while, and all the issues we talked about, they really connect towards actually doing more. Since we're running out of time, adaptation is critical in scaling up what we know already. Let me come back to the Paul for the 4 pour 1000, and Paul, you shared with us what the initiative is trying to achieve. What I'd like to ask you now is what you highlighted in terms of the objectives of the 4 pour 1000. Why are these objectives, you know, relevant in the context of agriculture?
Thank you very much. Sorry, we have a lot of noise in the ear because the mic is open somewhere in the room probably. Well,
yes, I'm asking colleagues again, please mute your mic because there is a lot of noise going on. Who else is joining us virtually? Please check your mic and turn it off. Thank you. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you. As I indicated previously, in the 4 pour 1000 initiative places soil health through carbon sequestration at the center of action. And the development of agroecological practices is key to achieve this goal, particularly in Africa. But in preamble, I would like to precise that there is no one agroecology or one agroecological practices. FAO know that perfectly. Agroecology is a continuum of agricultures that allow farmers to move away from conventional agriculture by taking inspiration from solutions implemented by the nature for ages. On one hand, it is about limiting the excess of use of mineral fertilizer and agrochemical, and on the other hand, it is about increasing cultivated and wild biodiversity as well as the organic carbon of the soil. Each producer must choose the type of agriculture she or he wishes to implement. Conservation agriculture, organic agriculture, biodynamic agriculture, regenerative agriculture, holistic grazing system, agroforestry, according to the agro-pedoclimatic context in which she or he evolved. The important choice must be guided in addition to the natural environment by her or his socio-economic objectives concerning the family, the access to the market, the level of prices, and her or his knowledge about alternative technical practices with the requested investment and the expected economic result. All farmers, not only in Africa, are often allowed to face this crucial choice. We need collectively to accompany them in that transition process, not only technically by allowing them to access the right information on alternative best practices, but also economically to ensure them and their family a decent living with payment of the correct prices for the product. And in that context, it is extremely important that, particularly in Africa, all actors get involved in that change to play their role at the right level. The policymaker, of course, the international organization, NGOs, the consumers, scientists, producers, companies. Well, the 4 pour 1000 initiative considers that we must support our farmers, all our farmers. In Africa, more than anywhere else, we must remember that they are the ones who feed the population. They are more often, they are the smallest one. And who, thanks to the storage of carbon in the soil, already allow human to fight against climate change. So we should recognize that role and help them to fight it for agroecology. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Paul. Before I invite Peter Odongo, I wonder if the technicians could please mute, the participants, because the noise is really overwhelming. I ask people attending virtually, please turn your mic off. If the technicians can help us to mute colleagues, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Peter, you talked earlier about engagement at the community level in Kenya. I'd just like to follow up with you on that. You heard, the issues to do with access to finance. How do you actually fast track the implementation of what you talked about, locally led climate resilient financing?
Once again, to advance it where I left, it is very key that when you look at the way climate finance is structured, a number of projects always delay at the local level because of the lack of local knowledge and also with the manner in which the financial are structured. This required an empowered green champion or a local person that understands the local perspective. In order to advance the resource mobilization of climate finance, which requires both from the public, private, and also from the development partners, the donors, there is need for local people who are empowered in terms of knowledge, policy, technology, and the systems and the changes that are coming in order to fast track those development. A number of resources are stuck in African continent, not because they are not available, but it is because of the lack of that hub between the communication of the local farmer. Financing locally led climate action, adaptation and resilience is still very nascent. It is not the easy way like adaptation, and it causes a lot of problems. So the key thing here to fast track this is to empower these green champions, which are very focused on sustainability. Resources are needed in terms of the human capacity. You may have a very good Mercedes-Benz, but if you can't, even if it is an automatic one, somebody must switch off the switch to make the car move. That person is a green champion at the local level. And the senior ambassador will know how being a green champion and how it is. We've moved and we've tried to mobilize additional resources. In Kenya, for example, financing locally led climate action, this is FLOCA, which has just mobilized about $200 million. That money requires human beings and farmers, small scale, to move it so that we can realize the impact, the effect, and make the farmer adaptive to the challenges of climate change. They must be the centrality of this transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's very clear. Let me bring in now Celine and to zoom in into project and the perspective from the private sector. So Celine, if you could share with us, some of the concrete examples of climate challenges in the project that you're developing in the context of what we've been hearing from other colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Zitouni. I would like, to describe the two main challenges we are facing with on a company by developing sustainable projects. That's not technical challenges, in fact. The first one is about the internal culture on the companies, and the second one is about taking risk on new solutions. So until now, all the companies could develop projects and their business themselves. When you really want to integrate sustainable development on your strategy, you have to work and discuss with all your ecosystem. So that's really a move the historical way to lead projects on company. For example, in my company, we are one of the leaders on tomatoes production. We manage a project to reintroduce and to capture the carbon on soil using our organic waste as a compost. That's a multi-partnership project with local authorities, national authorities, other producers all around us to use this compost, waste specialists, agronomic institute, bank. So those type of projects on a company can be seen too long, too complex, too difficult to lead, and they can be set aside if you don't have involved all your colleagues and all the company about the necessity of facing climate change. So really the first challenges is about moving the internal culture on companies to lead projects and on private sector to lead projects. And the second one is about yes, taking risk on new solutions. So most of the time, some technical and innovative solution exists on the market, can be tried, really. But they are also synonymous of financial risk, high investment in research and development. And that's also a big challenge to have and find the capacity of investing on new solution never tried on your geography or in your business. So to do a more sustainable business, that's essential to find money to finance this transition and to move the mindset to lead projects on private sectors.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Celine. That's really helpful for project perspective. Let me now move on to the final question. Again, Godefroy, who could not join us, I did ask him earlier the role of science in helping us to address these challenges that we've been talking about. So I asked him what science can do to address these challenges, and this was his answer.
Thank you. And in terms of what science Thank you. And in terms of what science can do to help unlock finance for food systems transformation, from our point of view, it's quite clear the CGIAR is fully mobilized to support that transition. And we do that through three key areas of work. The first one is to co-design science-based investment vehicles with private investors to help mobilize finance for the sector. And an example of that is investment vehicle we launched with an impact investor based out of Switzerland, Responsability, and that my colleague Mauricio Benitez will present in more details in the next panel, so I will not go into the details of that, but that's one important area of work for us. The second one is to use our analytical and science capacities to develop tools that help reducing the transaction costs associated with investing in food systems. So for instance, we're designing with an impact investor out of Kenya, Adapta, with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a credit scoring tool that takes into account climate risk. So it will make it very easy for local financial institution or an investor to understand climate-related risks of certain value chain in a certain location, but that will also come with a set of recommendations to manage and mitigate those risks, as well as a module to help monitor the investment. So this type of tools, from our point of view, are absolutely essential if we want to really support change in the ecosystem and provide data and analytics that make it much more easier for investments to take place and to identify bankable projects. The third area of work, which is also very critical from our point of view, is on metrics and defining with key actors across the ecosystems a shared understanding of what are the relevant metrics for investment into the sector. So for instance, we need to define much better the boundaries of sustainable agriculture, because often this is very context specific. So we need to understand what is sustainable agriculture and where. And from that point of view, we also need to standardize and harmonize ESG metrics to make it easier for the ecosystems to invest into the sector. And that's absolutely essential to help investors in assessing, measuring and reporting on their investments, and thereby facilitating finance flowing into the sector. So that's a key area of work. We're working with key actors like the AAA, EPAM, the International Platform on Adaptation Metrics, and other, and really trying to push the envelope, work with the different partners to reach that shared understanding to facilitate mobilizing finance for the sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Godfrey, and dear colleagues and dear participants. This brings us to the end of the first panel. So let me thank all the panelists for joining us and for really giving very nice and short and informative answers. So thanks everyone again. Thanks to Hakim, Karim rather, who has been really helping behind the scene. So Karim has been really active in putting all the panelists together, all the information, and really appreciate his effort for making this session successful. I won't summarize. Obviously, I've just picked up 2-3 points I'd like to share with everyone, really taking away from this first panel is the importance of adaptation. We've been talking about adaptation gap is really finance gap. That's something that came out very strongly. Very clearly, the impact on food security, particularly for the poor and most vulnerable, the importance of data analytics, soil health and innovation, and also the metrics. I think we still have a big gap in being able to have and to use harmonized metric system that can help for attracting investment as well. And the last point I picked up is the issue of scaling up. And I think there was very important points highlighted with regard to empowering local people, the farmers, and building the human capacity if we really want to scale up and build the agricultural resilience that we've been talking about. So these are some of the points I picked up. Thank you again to everyone who joined us for this panel and everyone who joined remotely. And now I'll hand over to my dear African brother, Ambassador Seni Nafo, who will moderate the second panel. Seni, over to you.
Merci, merci Zitouni. Thank you. Zitouni had the great privilege of being online and have most of his panel sitting next to me. It was great for me because I was able to take a lot of notes. And I have the exact opposite situation, which is most of my panel, if not all of my panel, is online. So I'll hope that I can try to make this lively in some ways so that we, we still find this extremely important. I'm not going to repeat what has been said. I think the challenges are clear. The challenges are known. The gaps are known. COVID made it even worse. We're now having inflationary pressure. We have a very fragile system. We are aware of that. And it's interesting. A few years ago, I wear a number of hats. I'm the coordinator of the Africa Adaptation Initiative, and AAA is the agricultural arm of the Africa Adaptation Initiative, and I'm also the Secretary General of AAA. I happen to have been and still am the spokesperson for the African group at UN climate negotiations. I sit on the board of the GCF, and what else? And I happen to have been a presidential envoy for climate change for Mali as well. And a few years ago, I used to say that Addis was my capital, that Addis Ababa in Africa was my country, because that's where I would be once every month, because the headquarters of the African Union are in Addis. And a few years ago, everything's changed, actually because of Peter, because Peter kept telling me, Seni, the challenge is at the local level. You have to get the local level right. You have to act at the local level. You have to mobilize the local level. And the local level capital in Africa is in Rabat. The headquarters of the local government, there's 16,000 local government are in Morocco. So I spend a lot of time now engaging at that level to really work with the champions. And this panel is very interesting because we're going to be talking about scaling up. Why are we not scaling up? the solutions are there. I remember that when we started AAA, soil fertility was number one. It was soil fertility, sustainable water management, finance, and then the advocacy. Now I even learn that there is vertical farming. You don't even need a soil. You can pretty much grow anything. So this is on R&D. But you can even grow proteins for humans, there's anything you can grow. On the technology side, there's all kinds of seeds. There's drought-resistant seed, extreme heat-resistant seed. You have digital services, green fertilizers, all kinds of finance. Why does it not take hold in Africa? You know, all of that is you know, you go to all number of fancy countries, it's all there. You just, you know, take a flight an hour away, then nothing is there. We've heard some of the answers, I think, here. I think Peter talked about an intermediary, but you need some kind of an intermediary. I happen to have been a derivatives trader in a former life, and we had all kinds of, we had brokers, we had market makers, we had clearing houses, we had all kinds of very sophisticated mechanisms for coordination and synergy to bring all those solutions together. So I hope that the panel that I have is ready to give us now the scale and how do we really make it happen. This is COP in Africa this year, and we as an initiative are very keen to see how we can finally scale this up. Riyad told us that in 2006, there was already this report by Zitouni and others of how do you realize the potential. I'm sure by FAO. I think I've seen a report in like 1980 already of how do you realize the potential. That's when I was born, and we're still there talking about potential. Dauda is my first panelist. I know Dauda very well. Dauda is a champion at the Adaptation Fund, the first international financial mechanism which allowed for access to direct access for regional and local entities. Dauda is now with the Islamic Development Bank, large infra portfolio, large agriculture portfolio. Dauda, tell me, please, at the bank, MDB now, how do you deal with all those financial instruments to make things happen? We're quite interested in learning from that very specific vantage point.
Thank you, Seni, and thank you everyone for having me here tonight. And sorry I could not join physically, although I am very close to Dubai. So to answer your question, MDBs they are already contributing very much into the 100 billion goal for climate finance. In 2020, the MDBs collectively had accounted as climate finance as much as more than 60 billion. And the portion of adaptation finance, unfortunately, was only about 24%, meaning that adaptation finance is still lagging behind for many reasons that we have been discussing today. You can see that 16 billion of adaptation finance from MDB related to the hundreds of billions that are needed on an annual basis to finance adaptation. It's not enough. So we have to be more innovative. We have to take advantage of the innovative instruments that are being more and more available. Private sector investment, we talk a lot about it, but how to unlock it, it's still a challenge. In the case of agriculture, of course, you will see more opportunities than in other sectors because of, for example, when we talk about commodities, when we talk about the value chains in agriculture, there are many aspects where taking into account the climate risks and impacts is very important. So it's important for businesses. So I think more and more big agro businesses have understood that they need to integrate those aspects. So many links to insurance, many links to private sector owned investment in climate proofing their investments, in taking into account the climate impacts in the whole all of the value chain. As MDBs, what we do in our operations as well, we make sure that all of our operations are really climate proofed and take into account the climate risks and are resilient. So we do it for agriculture project, we do it also for transport, energy, rural development project. We make sure that all the risks have been integrated and mitigated. So this is for our direct operations. As MDBs, we have developed joint methodologies for assessing adaptation finance. We have also developed a joint approach to Paris alignment, and this will help unlock additional resources for adaptation, and this will participate in the scaling up. Scaling up, when we talk about scaling up, of course, we have to make sure that indirect financing is also very important. When we have stakes in local banks, for example, in the case of ISDB, we have stakes in Islamic banks in many countries. How to have those Islamic banks get more concessional resources and get green line of finance for their clients. This will help in the scaling up, making sure that they will be able to support smallholders. And I talked about the insurance, which is also very, very important. With climate indexes, insurance, we can also make sure that many of the farmers that are in areas that are at risk can at least, in case of disaster, get back into their field. So I will stop here for the sake of time, and we'll get back to you during the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Dauda. We're going straight to a national perspective. Mariam from the Crédit Agricole in Morocco, where you are the leading financial institution supporting the agriculture sector. Mariam, please tell us, how do you blend finance? How do you blend, because a bank is a bank is a bank. How do you support that sector? How do you blend instrument, normal bank financial instrument with agriculture, which is a very specific sector and a very risky one from what I hear? Mariam?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. Yeah, as you know, and it has been said by Zitouni previously, more than 90% of farmers in Africa are smallholder farmers. So if we want the green transition to occur at scale, and this is the topic for today, these smallholder farmers have to be embarked in this transformation, and they have to be convinced to invest in sustainable agriculture and in adaptation practices. And this means that their access to finance and to credit has to be enhanced and improved. And from a Moroccan point of view, what has been done is that, being an agri-public bank, our objective was that each bankable project in agriculture should find its adequate financing offer. So we have created an innovative model based on the complementarity between microcredit, mesofinance, and traditional banking. So the microcredit is dedicated to the microfinance that have short-term activities and need low amounts. We have also the traditional banking, which serves the commercial farms that have a collateral. And finally, we have the mesofinance, which is actually where the innovation is, and which provides short and long-term loans to farmers that have no collateral. And thanks to this comprehensive model, whatever the risk profile is, our farmer can get access to a finance through a specific channel. And that is how we blend finance. Actually, we use that model so that we can use our own resources to finance agriculture, but we can also use donors and multilateral institutions' money so that we can channel it and bring it to the rural population and to the farmers. And finally, once you have all this scheme and these tools, what you need is that you have to ensure that the projects you're financing are sustainable projects. So to give you an example, we have developed a program which is supported by Agence Française de Développement that finances organic agriculture, energy efficiency at farm level, but also in the agro-industry and agri-waste management. The whole topic is really to encourage resilience investments in the whole value chain, agricultural value chain. So the specificity of the program is that it encompasses a loan, an allowance of 10%, and technical assistance. Now, one key takeaway from that program, which is still ongoing, is that we need much more funds on technical assistance than we had thought in the beginning. How can we explain that? Actually, we have noticed that potential project holders feel really limited in terms of technical or technological choice. Actually, they don't know which material to use, what impact it will have on their production. And what makes it more complex to give an answer is that for each specific project, the answer might be different. I would say organic agriculture, obviously, is not the same. You have to use different practices depending on the region where you're producing and on the crop. So generating a pipeline of projects has turned to be much more difficult than we expected. And the financing is not enough by itself when we're talking about financing green investments. So just to conclude, actually doing inclusive and green finance means doing much more than finance. It means building capacity internally, of course, but also at the client's level, and creating strong partnerships with the donors, but also with the institutions in place. You have to cooperate, to work with research institutions, with universities, ministries, etc., to make sure that the change will occur on the field.
Thank you, Mariam. I take good note. Tailor-made solutions, building capacity, and partnerships. I have Carl now from the International Partnership on Adaptation Metrics. It's very interesting. A few years ago, when some of us just interested in finance realized how adaptation metrics and adaptation rationale was important to access climate finance. All funds now trying to understand how do you track progress, how do you measure gaps, how do you ensure that adaptation activities are a specific taxonomy for accessing finance on the international market. This might be very easy for renewable energy and mitigation, but how do you really make the difference between an intervention which is, let's say, development and just adaptation? So very happy to have Carl sort of present some of the work is pushing with the partnership. Carl?
Thank you, Sine. And you're just conveying something that I think is promising, and that is that there is a realization of the need for metrics for finance. And, choices, regarding what is good investment, in particular as they relate beyond ROI, simple return on investment in the sustainable agriculture space, really does require that we think about, environmental, social, and governance factors. Agriculture is one of the most heavily exposed of asset classes to the impacts of climate change, from the floods and the droughts and many other potential risks that farmers face. And as such, the metrics for how agricultural investments relate to adaptation to climate are really critical to understand. And the choice of metrics is really challenging, though, anywhere, but certainly in the context of smallholders in Africa, with a variety of different systems of monitoring, with variable data, with language barriers, and so on. But so it's challenging, really, given a lack of suitable data often, and also the variability of the data and the indicators that would be available. I mean, as such, coming up with metrics that can be aggregated and can be compared across countries, agricultural commodities, and different technological contexts is really a challenge. But it's super important because, as those of you who are in the finance sector know, one needs to really come up with a way of prioritizing where one allocates finance and how they allocate it. And this does require an understanding of all of those variables related to ES&G for agriculture. And yeah, it's a challenge. So the International Platform on Adaptation Metrics, or IPAM, as we call ourselves, really exists to try to address these panoply of metrics challenges. We have some specific committees on agriculture and others, and we're working on a variety of approaches to really try to make sense of metrics. This latter effort of trying to make sense of metrics is mostly focused now on IPAM's Adaptation Metrics Mapping and Evaluation Framework, or AME. This is a framework that we launched at the COP in Glasgow. And it's an instrument that we're looking to apply to evaluate how metrics can be better selected that meet clearly defined challenges, adaptation challenges, and account for key aspects common to all adaptation interventions, we feel. I'm talking here in terms of what are these aspects. It includes understanding the purpose of the investment, understanding the purpose of the adaptation, looking at stakeholder engagement, participation, and communication strategies, considering stakeholder competencies and capacities, data and information, as I noted before, and also how this relates to evaluation and good practice. Even in the investment regime, you need to understand how your projects that you're funding, your underlying investments, are being undertaken, how they're being maintained, to service debt, and to understand and learn so that you can make even better investment decisions in the futures. The other aspect of this AME framework is that we try to apply these aspects against three metric sort of issues that are central to interventions. So these are looking at the stakeholders and their needs and applying it to purpose, for instance, or looking at how there needs to be a whole system perspective. We've discussed in the past how the boundaries set between what counts as a project and what's outside of it is very critical, because any sort of investment, clearly agricultural investments, don't just function in a bubble, but you have to look at the community context, you have to look at a variety of other things, but you have to set boundaries. And then thirdly, a focus we try to look at metrics through using this framework is how metrics support decision-making processes. And this is important not just for financier, but it's important for understanding the broader context of subsidies, new practices, government policies that can help to enable or potentially create disincentives for good adaptation. So for the agricultural space, IPAM has been formulating, and Godefroy mentioned is actually involved in this from CIAT, an adaptation mapping evaluation concept on sustainable finance for climate-adapted food systems. We hope this initiative and other efforts related to tools and techniques development in the agricultural metrics and evaluation space will help to clarify good practice in metric selection and use for investment and monitoring decisions. Just another example that fits within the agricultural space of how metrics are really important for agricultural finance is something I'm doing through my organization, the Higher Ground Foundation. It's a project in Cote d'Ivoire. We're going to be there for the next few weeks. That's looking at applying our climate vulnerability reduction credit for scaling up investment in agricultural adaptations. We're piloting this metric and exploring how a VRC purchase fund could stimulate innovation and investment. There's just one other thing I'd like to just say that's a little bit of it's a little bit off of this track, but I think it's very important, and I hope maybe we can discuss it a bit. And that is that within the development period,
wrap up?
the climate finance, is marking and attribution. I think we really need to be looking at, are we attributing and are we paying for adaptation or just agricultural investment? Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. This is actually extremely important because we're seeing that in reality, in accessing funds now, the need for articulating a climate rationale for adaptation is becoming almost a precondition or a condition to access finance. I have now Mauricio. Mauricio, you've heard the different challenges. The needs are in the tens of billions and increasing. Public finance is not going to be enough. Private not. We need to be blending. We have different objectives. How do we finance that? How do we ensure that we have enough adequate finance to meet the scale of our objectives? Mauricio.
Many thanks, and I hope you hear me well. I'm testing the mic. First of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm following on a very good and very thorough presentations and discussions, also following on Godefroy's presentation of what we've been doing together with the CGRR, and probably trying to summarize a bit where we are today and try to address your question. Well, we are an asset manager, and we've been doing this for close to 20 years in very close financing value chains in developing countries. So over 30 countries, commodities, and we have disbursed about 2 billion already over these years in the agricultural sector worldwide in the global south. And there has been a clear paradigm shift from financing productivity and more food to feed 10 billion people to feed these 10 billion within our planetary boundaries. And that's clear, that is clear now for consumers, for governments, but also for investors. And that's been key to be able to raise the money for this new fund that we have launched in 2021, that is the Climate Smart Food Systems. And why it's important to have this awareness now for investors, because actually public money has been there and to de-risk perceived and real risks in this type of investments. And we have been doing blended finance funds for quite some time in climate finance, particularly for renewable energy and energy efficiency. But the willingness to work in the overlap between climate finance and sustainable food was not there yet for private investors. Now we have seen clear interest to leverage that public and philanthropic capital with private money. So we see interest from institutional investors that normally are shy of this type of investments, and they see the need to be exposed to this and solving this problematic, this problem, and at the same time see the value of this philanthropic and catalytic support from government. So we are aiming to really this fund of 200 million to be half of it at least from private institutional investors that normally, again, they don't invest in impact. And just this is because it's a problem that everybody sees and they want to be exposure at. The other aspect is how to implement these investments. And here you have to mainstream climate change in the growth plans of agri and food businesses. And to do that, I'm only probably rephrasing what others have exposed. That is not only finance. You really need to start advocating. You need to work hand in hand with them and see how they can work not only in their business, but also along the value chain in trying to integrate in the food systems framework where we need to shift to sustainable diets. That is with technical assistance, and it has to be science-based, pre-investment and post-investment. And that's why that's something that we alone as investment managers, we cannot do. It has to be done with a partner like the CGIAR.
Thank you, Mauricio. I have a final panelist who couldn't join, but I was able to ask Tina the question. Tina is a principal with the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate. The question of the role of new technologies and innovation for adaptation, and I think we have a short video.
Thank you very much, Saini. Esteemed panelists, guests, I apologize that I cannot be with you in person to welcome you to the tremendous Expo 2020 in Dubai, but I'm extremely honored to be able to participate with you virtually. Now, as I'm sure has been covered throughout the event and through this panel today, we all know that greenhouse gas emissions from food systems constitute at least a quarter of global emissions. And yet simultaneously, agriculture is highly vulnerable to the droughts, floods, storms, fires, and other climate impacts that we are now seeing on a daily basis. Now, historically, much attention on climate innovation has gone to energy, and the UAE has been extremely proud to play a remarkable role in making renewable energy the game changer that it is today. We want to do the same for innovation agriculture. It's clear that we need both the breakthroughs and the enhancements of existing approaches that will give us not only a better and more resilient food system with meaningfully reduced carbon and environmental footprints, but also high returns on investment. To put it simply, we need to talk about soil as much as we talk about oil. Now, together with the United States, the UAE conceptualized the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, or AIM for Climate, with inputs from many different stakeholders. And we'd hope that this would be a vehicle for aligning political will as well as budgets around that innovation. So last April at President Biden's Climate Summit, a small group of countries previewed the concept of AIM for Climate with its anchor goal of significantly increasing resources for agricultural innovation by 2025. Just 6 months later at COP26, a much larger group of countries has joined, together with private sector actors and non-government actors, announcing $4 billion of such resources, making AIM for Climate one of the headline outcomes of Glasgow. Now, with the support of the UK COP presidency and the membership of both Egypt and the UAE as future COP presidents, AIM for Climate provides a unique opportunity. We can send not only a clear political message that the investment in this sector matters, but we can also help set a collective set of priorities that will enable Aim for Climate to be greater than the sum of its parts. Aim for Climate is a large tent. We have countries from various backgrounds coming in with their own nationally determined objectives and needs, and we have entities ranging from domestic research institutions to foreign aid agencies as a part of our group. We've had a remarkable lightning speed start, and we're very much looking forward to working together with all of you to ensure that Aim for Climate really does deliver on its potential for our food systems and our climate. We very much welcome any questions that you might have by going to the Aim for Climate website on www.aimforclimate.com. And I thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful time at Expo. And it's been a pleasure to participate in this panel, albeit virtually. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tina. We're almost there at the end. I have a final question for each of the panelists. It's a 1-minute question. Hopefully it will be clear. The question is the following. As I said, this is a very special year for Africa, because we're holding COP actually in the next few months. So my question, and you have a maximum of 1 minute, but if you can knock it in 30 seconds, that'll be fine. What are the concrete steps or actions that you will be taking as an institution to demonstrate tangible progress at this COP? Usually when we have COP in the South and in the global South, what we are interested in is implementation and delivery. Not pledges, not commitments, but delivery. Ideally, and think about delivery as Peter said, at the local level. How is that going to be, what we do at COPs, how is that going to matter on the ground for those who are there? And we're talking agriculture. So 1 minute each, what are you going to do this year? Concrete action or steps to really produce an outcome, a tangible outcome, or show some progress, but we can all celebrate in Sharm when we meet in few months ago. And of course, we'll be with you throughout the way to achieve that. Dauda, you first.
Thank you, Seni. I think it's an unfair question when it's asked in February.
You are the banker. Come on, you are the banker. So what do you want me to ask?
we are cooking a few things, but yeah, unfortunately, we are in February right now, and the road to Sharm el-Sheikh is filled with initiatives, discussions we will have. Hopefully, we will be announcing a few things. What we can just say is that as the Islamic Development Bank Egypt is one of our member countries. We have more than half of our member countries in Africa. So this is a very important COP for us. And we are working diligently with our member countries to make sure that it will be a very successful COP with concrete activities, inshallah.
Thank you, Dauda. We'll follow up here. You can trust us.
Yes, sure.
Mariam as well, Le Crédit Agricole. Tell us what's in store for the next few weeks and months.
Well, as I said, we're already trying to do as much as possible. As you may know, Morocco is experiencing one of the worst droughts we had for the last 30 years. So it's also a motivation for us to do more for adaptation, because we know that climate change is a reality now, and it's not in the future, it's really now. So we will try to do our best to finance more and more adaptation projects, to create a pipeline of projects, to empower our farmers and work with all the ecosystems so that we can together be ready for COP, for the next COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. And it's really a privilege that it's held in Africa, and we will be there.
Thank you. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. Carl, can you tell us some of the concrete outputs?
Concrete outputs. I mean, this is the global goal on adaptation we're talking about here, and the Sharm el-Sheikh work program on it. And so goal has to do with how do you measure, where you're going. And IPEM and its members are really hoping that we can come up with some more specific approaches that are also sensitive to context and data availability so that we can go beyond, you know, the three aspects of reduced vulnerability, enhanced resilience, and adaptive capacity to say something specific, more specific. So we're involved in consultations and providing views on the importance of metrics and applying standard frameworks for these so that we can get closer. We have some members who are involved in some innovative ways of looking at how we can track progress, including the Gap Track initiative by the IDDRI. And I just hope that we can get greater clarity and some focus on specifics by the time we're at Sharm el-Sheikh and get the consensus of the broader community of parties and the private sector that we have to be specific, more specific than we're currently. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very specific, GGA, which was actually tabled and defended by the Africa group. So we're very proud that this was one of the achievements of Glasgow. Benito, blending. No, Mauricio, blending. Are we going to see some vehicles, some investment, some SPVs by Sharm? Mauricio, did you hear? Are we going to have any launch of an investment vehicle or something by Sharm? What's the plan for the next few months on your side? Is he on mute? Well, if we're not able to connect with Benito, Mauricio, sorry. I'll take it from here, and we've been. So here's what we, as AAA, will do in the next few weeks. Hopefully, right after Ramadan, we'll organize a strategic workshop. Abir, our DG, announced in her introductory remarks the AAI AAA Climate Finance Readiness Program. This is 3 years in the making. I think that we first had the workshop in April 2019, so that was before COVID. And 25 countries join. Another 5 or 7 countries are willing to join the program. It's a very interesting program, which is articulated around 3 clusters. One on institutional capacity, having senior national expertise at the national and local level on both climate finance and just climate change. Working on models, integrating climate models in macroeconomic models at the national and local level. We're going to look at strategies. We're going to transform some of the strategies in the adaptation agriculture sector into investment plans. Already, as an initiative, AAA, we've supported, I think, 7 countries. So we're going to now expand. We have now the experience, the expertise, and the methodology to do that and replicate that, and go now at the local level, and then we will be building pipelines. Actually, one of our goals is that by the time we reach Sharm, I heard Godefroy said that one of the challenges is we don't have enough bankable pipeline. So I hope that by the time we reach Sharm, that we'll have for the first time a bottom-up pipeline of programs and projects at the local levels, and that the financiers and the bankers will have been able to sort of go through some of that pipeline. So we'll be working with all of you. Definitely, Dauda will visit you in Jeddah. You'll look at the pipeline. Most of the countries are members of the Islamic Development Bank. We're following very closely, of course, the situation at home in Rabat. Mariam, we're actually following closely how Morocco is dealing with the droughts. And I think that a lot of lessons are there to be learned in terms of the comprehensive strategy which was just presented by His Majesty's government on both having subsidies, grants to small farmer holders, expanding insurance, having direct food subsidy and all kinds of subsidy. We're very interested in that very comprehensive program, and I think that at the minimum that we can learn is other African countries can benefit in learning from that experience. Carl, on GGA, I promise to link you with the Africa Adaptation team, which is working on the GGA. We want those specific approaches. We want to be driving intellectually that agenda. We want to lead it. We were the ones who advocated for that agenda, so we really work closely with IPAM on moving. And Benito, Mauricio, why do I keep calling you Benito? Because I have a very good friend at Oxford University who is Benito, that's why, but I haven't seen in a long time. Mauricio, we'll be working with you. We want to see some of those blending facilities in Africa. And we want to see African institutions, commercial and ag banks, such as Credit Agricole, but KCB as well in Kenya, CRDB in Tanzania, other banks which are Atijari Wafa, which are accredited to the Green Climate Fund and have local branches. We want to localize climate finance. So this is from our hand. We will also put in place some kind of a coordination mechanism. We heard it, but we need synergy, we need coordination, and that can be, that's one of the lessons of COVID. Through platforms, virtual platforms, we can meet, we can coordinate, and really use that opportunity of COP27 on the continent to have concrete, tangible progress on the ground. I thank you all for your perseverance and for your interest in the topic and for staying so long. So congratulate to the audience and to everyone who stayed that late. I thank you.